Listen. Listen to the orchard. In the Blue Ridge foothills of Patrick County, Virginia, in the last days of April 1923, the apple trees are coming into bloom. The blossoms are white going pink at the edges, and they open in waves from the lower branches upward, the way a piece of music builds, slowly and then all at once. The bees have already found them. You can hear the bees from the road, a low, sustained hum that sounds less like insects and more like the land itself, breathing. The grass between the rows of trees is long and wet with morning, and a man's boots make a dark track through it as he walks. A woman moves parallel to him 2 rows over, her dress brushing the grass, her arms reaching up to tie off a loose branch with a strip of cloth. Farther down the slope, a young man drags a section of fence rail toward the gap where winter heaved the posts. Another young man follows behind him, carrying the tools. A girl works at the edge of the orchard nearest the house, moving methodically along the tree line, checking each trunk for damage, her fingers pressing the bark where the deer have rubbed. 5 people, 23 acres, 112 trees planted in rows that have been there longer than anyone currently living has been alive. The orchard was established in 1810 by Elias Ames, who came down from the Shenandoah Valley with his wife, 3 children, and a wagon full of grafted stock. The trees are old now, gnarled and thick-waisted, the kind of trees that look like they have opinions. The house at the top of the hill is old too. 2 stories of rough-hewn timber and chinking, with a covered porch and a root cellar and a cider press in the outbuilding that smells of fermentation and crushed fruit, even when it hasn't been run in months. The 5 people working in this orchard on this April morning are Gideon Ames, who is 52 years old and built like one of his own apple trees. Compact, weathered, rooted. His wife, Hazel, 48, who moves with the particular efficiency of a woman who has been working since before she could read. Their eldest son, Clement, 24, broad-shouldered and deliberate, who inherited his father's steadiness, but not, it will turn out, his father's certainty. Their younger son, Aubrey, 20, who is built differently from the rest of them. Lighter, quicker, with eyes that seem to be cataloging everything they land on. And their daughter, Pearl, 17, the youngest, and the one whose presence in the orchard this morning feels somehow wrong. The way a note played in the wrong key. Sounds wrong before you can name why. They work. The bees hum. The blossoms fall when the wind moves through them. A slow white drift that settles on shoulders and hair, and on the rims of the water bucket that Hazel carries from tree to tree. Gideon glances at his wife. She glances back. Something passes between them that is not a word. Clement looks up at his father from the far end of the row, and his father raises 2 fingers, which means something. Finish that row, or come to the house when you're done. Or something understood between them that does not require language, because language is not a thing they use anymore. Has not been a thing they use. Not for 13 months. 13 months of silence. The sound of boots on the road. A woman's voice carrying up the hill with the ease of someone accustomed to being heard across distances. "Morning, Gideon. Morning, Hazel." The voice belongs to Viola Puckett, who lives a quarter mile down the road and who is 53 years old and who has, in the past 13 months, stopped by the Ames property more times than she can accurately count. She is carrying a pie. She carries a pie most times. Today, it is vinegar pie, which she made this morning, which is still warm, which she holds up now so that the Ames family can see it from where they stand, scattered through the orchard. Gideon turns. He raises one hand, not a wave exactly, more like an acknowledgement. The gesture of a man who has been interrupted in the middle of something and wants you to know he has seen you without wanting you to think he is coming to talk to you. Because he is not coming to talk to you. He is not going to talk to you. Gideon Ames has not said a word to anyone outside his family since March of last year, and what he has said inside his family since March of last year amounts to nothing at all, because inside his family there is also only silence. Viola Puckett stands at the fence line. She has known the Ames family for 22 years. She was at their wedding. She helped bring Pearl into the world when the midwife was 20 minutes too late. She has eaten at their table, borrowed their press, relied on Gideon's judgment about weather, and on Hazel's judgment about nearly everything else. She knows these people. She does not know what has happened to them. "I brought you a pie," she calls. The information is unnecessary. They can see the pie. But Viola has learned that in the absence of any real communication, she will fill whatever space she can with words, as if her words might somehow prime the pump, coax something out of them. It has not worked in 13 months. She does not expect it to work today. Pearl looks up from where she crouches at the base of a tree. For a moment, just a moment. She seems about to call something back. Her mouth opens slightly. Her chin lifts. Then her jaw closes. Her eyes drop back to the bark in front of her. Viola sets the pie on the fence post. This is the arrangement. She brings things. She leaves them. She does not require acknowledgement, though she watches for it. Gideon nods once more, then turns back to his work. Hazel has not looked up at all. The boys are still working down the slope. Pearl watches Viola from her crouch by the tree, with an expression that Viola will later describe to her husband as the saddest thing she has ever seen. And she once sat with her mother through 3 days of dying. Viola stands at the fence for another moment. The bees fill the silence where words should be. Then she turns and walks back down the road. That evening, she sits across from her husband Harold at their supper table, and she says what she has been saying in various forms for 13 months. There's something wrong in that house that food can't fix. Harold, who is a practical man and who is somewhat tired of this subject, says that some people are just private. Viola looks at him for a long time without responding. Then she says, "Harold, I have known private people all my life. Private people don't act like that family acts. Private people still talk. They just don't tell you things." She pauses. That family doesn't talk. There's a difference between not telling someone and not talking. A big difference. And whatever that difference is, that's what's wrong in the Ames house. Harold has no answer for this, because Viola is, in this, as in most things, correct. The pie will be gone from the fence post by morning. Someone always comes and takes it in. Someone always eats it. The family has not starved, has not declined in any visible physical way, has not abandoned their work or their faith or their community participation. They are there every Sunday in the third pew from the front, and they sing the hymns with everyone else, and they follow the liturgy, and afterward they stand briefly in the churchyard before returning to their wagon and going home. They do not shake hands, and they do not linger, and they do not speak, but they are present. And in Patrick County, Virginia, in 1923, presence accounts for something. What they are doing, this family, this silent contract they have entered into, is not something the community has a word for. It is not grief exactly, or not only grief. It is not madness, because madness does not organize itself so neatly, does not establish a system of knocks on walls and written notes and gestures that function as a kind of grammar. It is not a religious practice the Reverend Odell can identify, though Lord knows he has tried to identify it. It is something older and stranger and more particular than any of those explanations, and it has now been going on long enough that the community has begun to move from confusion to a kind of resigned acceptance, the way people accept any weather pattern that has no apparent end, not happily, not without complaint, but with the particular resignation of people who know that some things are beyond their capacity to fix. But there is one person who has not yet arrived at resignation. One person who is still 2 weeks away from hearing about the Ames family, who is at this moment in Richmond, Virginia, sitting in the office of a newspaper editor named Douglas Prentice, being assigned to a story she has not asked for and does not particularly want. Her name is Faye Gresham. She is 29 years old. She is a staff writer for the Richmond Evening Dispatch, a position she holds partly because she is good at her job and partly because the paper's owner, a progressive-minded man named Caldwell, believes in the novelty value of a woman journalist and has found her useful in ways that her male colleagues are not. She has covered women's suffrage rallies and temperance marches and a murder trial in Norfolk that got a great deal of attention. She has a reputation for stories about people, not events, for finding the human architecture underneath the news. Douglas Prentice is a compact, impatient man who smokes even when he is trying not to smoke, which means he often has an unlit cigarette moving between his fingers, like a nervous habit made solid. He has in front of him a letter from a Presbyterian minister in Patrick County, a Reverend C.L. Odell, who has written to the paper about a local family whose situation he describes as singular and troubling and possibly of interest to your readers. The letter is 3 pages long. Prentice has summarized it in 2 sentences, which he now reads to Faye. Family of 5 in Patrick County hasn't spoken a word to anyone, including each other, for over a year. Minister thinks it's a religious thing. Thinks it might be a story. Faye considers this. A family that doesn't talk. For over a year. All 5 of them. According to the minister, yes. That's strange. That's why I'm sending you. Faye is quiet for a moment. Outside Prentice's window, the Richmond street noise floats up. Horses, motor cars, the distant whistle of a river barge. Inside the office, it is very quiet. Prentice taps his unlit cigarette against the desk. I'm thinking human interest, he says. Religious community piece. Something gentle. Read well in the Sunday supplement. Faye is still looking at the summarized letter. She has the habit, when thinking, of going very still. Not checked out still, but concentrated still. The way a dog goes still when it hears something in the grass. What's the family's name? She asks. Ames, Gideon and Hazel Ames. She nods slowly. When do you want me to go? End of the week. Take a few days. Talk to the minister. Talk to the neighbors. Try to talk to the family. Write it up. He pauses. It might not be anything. It It might be a couple of religious eccentrics and a slow neighbor who doesn't understand what a vow of silence is. Faye is already thinking about what to pack, what questions to ask, what she will need to understand before she can understand anything. It might not be nothing either, she says. Prentice looks at her for a moment. No, he agrees. It might not. She takes the train south on Thursday, May the 3rd, 1923. The line runs as far as Martinsville, and from there she hires a man with a motor car to take her into the county. The Blue Ridge foothills come up as you move south and west from Martinsville, the land lifting and folding, the roads narrowing, the farms spacing out. It is a landscape that has always struck Faye as beautiful, in a way that has nothing to do with prettiness. The mountains here are not dramatic. They are old, worn down to their essentials, the rock and the soil, and the trees in their particular arrangements. The kind of beauty that makes no effort, that has been there long enough to stop caring whether anyone notices. The man who drives her, a leathery individual named Cress, who makes this route irregularly, and who has strong opinions about the condition of the roads, tells her unprompted about the county as they drive. Who grows what? Who is related to whom? Which families have been there long, and which are newcomers? Newcomers meaning arrived within the last 50 years. He tells her about the prohibition stills up in the hollows, which everyone knows about and no one discusses with strangers, and about the dry spell 2 summers back that hurt the apple harvest, and about a church that split over a matter of doctrine that he cannot now recall the specifics of. She asks him about the Ames family. He is quiet for a moment. The motor car bounces over a rut in the road. Then he says, "You know about them, do you?" "That's why I'm here." Another pause. The road curves around a hillside, and below them a valley opens up, a quilt of fields and orchards and woodlots. "They're good people," he says finally. "Always been good people. I've known Gideon Ames since I was a boy. His daddy and my daddy knew each other." He stops. "I don't know what to make of what they're doing. I don't think anybody does." "What are they doing?" Faye asks. She knows. She wants to hear how it sounds from someone who knows them. Cress moves his jaw as if chewing on the question. "Not talking," he says. "Any of them. To anyone. Not for going on 1.5 years now. Maybe longer." He looks at the road. You go by there on a workday and they're all out in that orchard, working like they always worked, doing what needs to be done. Just nobody saying anything. Not to each other, not to you if you stop and say hello. Gideon'll wave. Hazel'll nod. The boys'll look at you. But not a word comes out of any of them. He pauses. "It's the strangest thing I've ever seen, and I've seen some strange things in this county." They drive for a while without speaking. The light is changing, the afternoon going golden over the hilltops. "Does anyone know why?" Faye asks. Cress shakes his head. "Not that I've heard. Minister's got his ideas. Doctor had his ideas. Nobody knows. They're not telling on account of..." He stops, seems to realize what he was about to say, almost smiles. "On account of the fact that they're not talking." Faye writes that down in her notebook. On account of the fact that they're not talking. She will think about this sentence for days. She will think about how it describes not just the Ames family's specific situation, but a deeper logic she is only beginning to understand. That the thing which could explain the silence is the thing the silence has made impossible. The answer is behind a door that is locked from the inside, and the key is in the lock, and reaching it would require doing the one thing that cannot be done. She doesn't know that yet. She will. The Ames orchard comes into view as the motor car crests a ridge. Faye sees the apple trees first, 3 or 4 acres of them on a southward slope, still carrying the last of the spring blossoms on their upper branches, the fruit just beginning to set on the lower ones. Then, the house, back from the road, set on the hill with the orchard below and a woodlot above, solid and old-looking. A front porch with 2 chairs, a well-worn path from the porch to the outbuilding where the press is housed. No one is visible in the orchard as they pass. It is late afternoon, nearing supper time, and the family has likely come in for the day. Cress slows the motor car as they go past the fence line, and for a moment they both look at the property in silence. The 2 of them, outside, looking in. Then he drives on to the house Faye has arranged to board at, which belongs to a widow named Mrs. Calhoun, who takes in travelers and who will, over the next several days, prove to be an excellent and inexhaustible source of local information. Mrs. Calhoun is a tall woman in her 60s, with white hair and the posture of someone who was raised to believe that slouching was a moral failing. She feeds Faye a large supper and then talks to her for 2 hours. Most of what she says about the Ames family confirms what Faye already knows from the Reverend Odell's letter. But Mrs. Calhoun is a more nuanced observer than the minister, more attentive to texture and feeling. Hazel Ames is the one I worry about, Mrs. Calhoun says. She is knitting as she talks, the needles moving in their steady rhythm. The men, well, men can go quiet. Men have their ways of being in the world that don't require much talking. And the boys, young men can get strange, especially out here in the hills, especially when they've got something on their minds. But Hazel, she shakes her head. Hazel used to talk. I don't mean she was a gossip or a chatterbox. I mean she was a woman who communicated. She had language in her, the way some people have music in them. And now she hasn't said a word to anyone since, when was it? March of last year. 14, 15 months. The needles click. That's not natural. For a woman like Hazel, that's not natural. What do you think happened? Faye asks. Mrs. Calhoun looks at her steadily, over the top of her knitting. I think they know what happened, she says. I think every single one of them knows exactly what happened and exactly why they're doing this. I think the not talking is a choice, not a condition. And I think... She pauses, goes back to her knitting. I think there are things in that family that have needed saying for a very long time, and whenever they finally got said, they were said in a way that couldn't be unsaid, and now they're trying to figure out what comes after that. Faye writes this down too. She writes down a great many things that evening, not so much for the article she is supposed to be writing as for her own understanding. She has a habit of writing toward clarity, of using the notebook as a way of thinking, arranging the things she knows in columns and rows, until the shape of what she doesn't know becomes visible. What she knows, a family of 5 has maintained complete silence for approximately 14 months. This silence is voluntary, confirmed by the county doctor who has examined all 5 and found their vocal apparatus functional. It extends to their interactions with each other and with the community. It has a disciplined quality, a system of communication through written notes, gestures, and a code of knocks on walls and surfaces. They continue to function, maintaining their orchard, attending church, conducting such business as they must conduct through written means. What she doesn't know: why? That is the only question, but it is enormous. She will spend the next several days approaching it from every angle available to her, before she begins to understand that the angle she needs is not one that anyone but the family themselves can give her, and that getting it from the family will require a way of talking to them that does not involve talking. She starts with Reverend Odell. The church is 3 miles from the Ames property, a white painted frame building on a crossroads that serves a congregation of about 60 families. Odell meets her in the churchyard on Friday morning. He is a man in his late 40s, spare and deliberate in his movements, with the particular quality of attention that characterizes ministers who take their vocation seriously, the sense that he is listening to you, not just with his ears, but with whatever it is in a person that listens past the words. He has been the minister of this congregation for 9 years. He officiated at the marriages of both Clement and... He pauses here. Well, Clement is not yet married, he corrects himself. He baptized Aubrey and Pearl. He has known the family as long as he has been here, which is to say, he knows them the way a minister knows his parishioners. Well enough to see them clearly in certain lights, insufficiently in others. He tells her about the note. This is the thing she has most wanted to hear about. The note that Gideon Ames handed him when he visited the house in March 1922. The single written statement that is the closest thing to an explanation the family has ever offered. He handed it to me at the door, Odell says. They are sitting on a bench in the churchyard, and the morning light comes through the trees in that slow, shifting way it has in spring. I'd come to check on them because I'd noticed the change in church, the not speaking, the not participating in the fellowship afterward. I thought perhaps there'd been some illness, some grief. I wanted to see if I could help. He is quiet for a moment. Gideon answered the door. He looked the way he has looked ever since, which is to say, he looked like himself, only with something removed, as if someone had taken out one component of Gideon Ames and left everything else intact. He didn't speak. I said good morning. I said I'd come to see how the family was doing. He held up one finger. Wait. And then he went inside and came back and handed me a piece of folded paper. The note, as Odell has it memorized. We have sinned with our tongues. We will not sin again. That's all it said? Faye asks. That's all it said. He looks down at his hands. I thought, at the time, that this was a temporary thing, a period of penance. I've read of such practices, not common in our tradition, but not unknown. A vow of silence undertaken for spiritual reasons, as a form of mortification or dedication. I thought a week, perhaps 2 weeks. I said to him, Gideon, I understand. I will pray for you. And I shook his hand and I left. He stops. That was 15 months ago. Have you been back since? 3 times. Each time the same. Gideon at the door, a nod, and nothing more. The second time I brought paper and pen, thinking we might communicate in writing, and he took the paper and wrote, We appreciate your concern. We are well. We are working this out as a family. I tried to ask, wrote my questions down, about the nature of the sin, about whether they needed help, about whether this was a permanent arrangement or a temporary one. He read each question, and either didn't respond or wrote, We are not ready to say more. Odell looks at her steadily. I want you to understand something. I have spent 15 months trying to decide whether I have a pastoral obligation to do something more, to intervene, to involve the county, to take some action. And each time I go back to that note. We are working this out as a family. They have not asked for help. The children are cared for. The farm is functioning. They are present in worship. He pauses. At what point does a minister override a family's stated wish for privacy in order to provide assistance they have not requested? I don't have a clean answer to that question. Faye thinks about this. Do you believe they've sinned? She asks. In the way they mean it? Odell is quiet for a long time. A bird somewhere in the churchyard calls once, then goes silent. I believe they have. He says finally. And I believe that what they believe about themselves matters more, for the purposes of this silence, than what's objectively true. He looks at her. Sin or not, and I'm not in a position to judge that. Something happened in that house that the family cannot get past without some kind of reckoning. Whether the silence is the right reckoning, I don't know. It has a logic to it. A terrible logic, but a logic. She asks about Pearl. She asks because of what Viola Puckett told her, relayed through Mrs. Calhoun. The girl who sometimes mouths words and stops herself, who has the look of someone in a private war. Odell's expression shifts. Not much. He is a contained man. But enough. Pearl is the one who concerns me most, he says. She is 17 years old. The others, Gideon is a man of strong character, the kind of man who can commit to something difficult and hold to it without breaking. Hazel has her own strength, her own reasons for holding on. Clement is his father's son in most respects. Aubrey. He pauses. Aubrey is harder to read. But Pearl. He shakes his head slowly. Pearl came to church last November and sat through the service, and then, as the congregation was singing the final hymn, I looked down the pew, and she was crying. Not theatrically, not attracting attention, but crying quietly, steadily, in the way of someone who has been crying for a long time and has gotten efficient at it. By the time the hymn ended, she had composed herself. She was back in her family's silence. But in that moment, he stops. In that moment, she was a 17-year-old girl who needed to be able to talk about something and couldn't. Faye writes, Pearl, November, hymn, the 17-year-old in the silence. She writes it and she looks at it, and something shifts in her understanding of this story. She came here thinking it was about a family, about an abstraction. Silence as choice, silence as punishment, silence as a community curiosity. She is beginning to understand that it is about a girl, not only about a girl, but a girl is where it is most legible, most visible, most urgently in need of something. She visits Dr. Erskine that afternoon. He practices medicine out of a house in Stewart, the county seat, which is not much of a county seat, but has a courthouse and a general store and a doctor, and that puts it ahead of most places in the county. Erskine is a practical man, 50-ish, who went to medical school in Roanoke and came back here because this is where he is from, and who has the weary thoroughness of a man who has seen most things and been surprised by few of them. He examined all 5 Ames family members in June 1922, 3 months after the silence began, at the request of, he hesitates here, as if checking himself for confidentiality, at the request of a concerned party in the community. He won't say who. Faye suspects Viola Puckett. They came willingly, he says. All 5 of them. Came in together, sat in my waiting room together, went in one at a time. Gideon first. I examined him. Heart, lungs, throat, reflexes, everything normal. I asked him to say, "Ah." He shook his head, politely, firmly, as if it were against his principles, which I came to understand. It was. Erskine leans back in his chair. I asked him to vocalize in any way, clear his throat, hum, anything. He shook his head again. I made him aware that I was a doctor, and this was a medical examination, and that his silence, whatever its purpose, was making the examination difficult. He took out a piece of paper and wrote, "I understand. My vocal cords are sound. I am not using them by choice." He pauses, and I believed him, because there is a kind of certainty in that family, in all of them, that makes you believe what they tell you, even when what they're telling you is something you can barely credit. Did you examine the throat? Physically examine the vocal cords? Visually, yes. All 5. Normal. No lesions, no inflammation, no scarring, no signs of any mechanical obstruction. And the quality of their non-speech was wrong for a physical cause. When someone can't speak due to injury or illness, there is an effort present, a straining. In the Ames family, there was no strain at all. Silence was not something being held against its will. It was something being chosen. Did any of them seem distressed? Faye asks. He considers this for a long time. Pearl, he says finally, and then, almost immediately after, all of them, in different ways. Gideon had a set to his jaw that I recognized. It was the look of a man in pain who has decided not to acknowledge the pain. Hazel looked. He stops. Hazel looked like she was somewhere else, like her body had come to my office, but she had sent it alone. He is quiet for a moment. The boys were hardest to read. Clement seemed almost comfortable with it, in a way that struck me as wrong, as if he'd been practicing silence for years before it became official. Aubrey was agitated, tried not to show it, but his hands were working on each other the whole time he sat in my chair. And Pearl, he stops again. Pearl started to ask me something. I saw it. She opened her mouth, and she pulled in a breath, and she was going to speak. And then she looked at her hands and closed her mouth again. And I had a feeling then that I can only describe as witnessing something violent, as if she'd been stopped by something invisible, as if the silence was not freedom, but force. Faye writes this down. The silence was not freedom, but force. She asks whether he made a report, took any official action. On what basis? He says, and his tone is not defensive, just honest. 5 mentally competent adults, no physical harm, no children under the age of, well, Pearl was 16 and a case could have been made, but on the basis of what? She was being cared for. The family was intact. The farm was functioning. He rubs his face. I documented what I found. I wrote up my notes. I've sat with those notes more times than I can count, and I still don't know what the right answer was. He looks at her. Are you going to tell me in your article what happened? Why they're doing this? I don't know yet, she says. I don't know if anyone will tell me. If anyone tells you, Erskine says carefully, I'd like you to consider not printing it. She looks at him. Not in detail, he clarifies. Whatever it is, whatever happened in that house, it's theirs. They've been silent about it for 1.5 years. That silence is a kind of ownership, even if it's painful ownership. If you publish it in a newspaper... He stops, shakes his head. I'm not saying don't write the story. I'm saying think about what belongs to the public and what belongs to a family. She thinks about this conversation for a long time. She thinks about it that night in Mrs. Calhoun's spare room, listening to the sound of the county settling into its evening quietness. The night birds, the far-off bark of a dog, the creak of the old house around her. She has been a journalist for 7 years, and she has believed, mostly, in the public's right to know. She has believed in information as a corrective, as a necessity, as a kind of justice. She has written about things that people would have preferred to keep private, and she has felt, mostly, that she was right to do it. She is less certain now. Something about this family, something about the quality of their silence, the weight of it, the evident cost, makes the usual calculus feel insufficient. She is not here, she is beginning to realize, to extract a story from these people. She is here, or she is becoming here, for something else. For something that has less to do with what she will write than with what she might be able to do. She goes to the Ames property on Saturday morning. She goes alone, without a plan, which is unusual for her. She walks up the road from Mrs. Calhoun's house in the early light, carrying her notebook and a jar of preserves that Mrs. Calhoun pressed on her. Take them something. Don't go empty-handed. It's rude to go empty-handed. And she opens the gate at the bottom of the path and walks up to the house. The orchard is to her left as she walks, the trees showing their new leaves in the morning light. She can see no one working yet. The house ahead is quiet. On the porch, the 2 chairs sit empty. She knocks, a long pause, then footsteps inside. The door opens and Gideon Ames is standing there, looking at her. She has seen photographs of him. There is one in Reverend Odell's church records, taken at some community event years ago. But the photographs did not prepare her for the particular quality of his presence. He is not tall, but he stands in his doorway with an absolute stillness that seems to take up more space than his physical size would suggest. His face is deeply lined from years of outdoor work, with a broad forehead and gray eyes that look at her without expression, but with an attentiveness that she finds, almost immediately, somewhat unnerving. He is holding the door open with one hand, and he is waiting. Mr. Ames, Faye says. My name is Faye Gresham. I'm a journalist from the Richmond Evening Dispatch. I'm working on a story about this community. About life in Patrick County. The orcharding traditions, the families that have been here a long time. All of this is true. None of it is the whole truth. She watches his face as she says it. Nothing changes. I was hoping I might speak with you, or... She pauses, thinking of what she knows. Or communicate with you in whatever manner is most comfortable. Gideon looks at her for a moment, then he reaches behind him. She didn't see, until now, that there is a small table just inside the door, and on it, a pad of paper and a pencil. And he writes something and turns the pad toward her. What newspaper did you say? The Richmond Evening Dispatch. He writes, Who told you about us? A minister named Odell wrote to the paper. She pauses. I haven't come to make trouble for your family, Mr. Ames. I've come because what you're doing is unusual, and unusual things often have something important inside them, and I try to find what that is." He looks at her for a long time. This, she will later understand, is how Gideon Ames makes decisions, through a sustained stillness that looks like nothing but is actually a kind of rigorous internal process. He writes, "Come back Monday. I will tell the family you came." "Thank you," she says. She holds up the jar of preserves. He takes it without any change of expression, nods once, and closes the door. She stands on the porch for a moment. Somewhere in the house, she hears, or thinks she hears, the sound of something. A breath. A footstep. The particular quality of multiple people being very quiet in a small space. She walks back down the path. At the bottom, she turns and looks back at the house. In the upstairs window, there for only a second before it moves away, the pale oval of a face. Pearl. She knows, without knowing how she knows, that it was Pearl. She goes back on Monday, as promised. This time, when she knocks, it is not Gideon who answers the door, but Hazel. And this is the first time Faye Gresham sees Hazel Ames clearly. And what she sees is this: a woman who has endured something specific and large, and who has organized herself around that endurance so completely that the endurance has become her. She is not broken. She is, in some ways, more intact than most people Faye has met. But she is intact around a wound the way a tree grows around a nail, the damage enclosed, the form changed forever. Hazel looks at her. She steps back from the door and gestures. "Come in." The house is clean and orderly in the way of houses where the people who live in them spend most of their time outside, where the interior is functional rather than decorated. A front room with chairs and a table and a fireplace, a kitchen beyond. Stairs. Faye is aware immediately of the house's soundlessness. Not the soundlessness of emptiness, but the soundlessness of occupied people who make no noise. She can see Gideon at the kitchen table, writing something. Clement is at the window on the far side of the room, mending a piece of equipment. Aubrey is on the stairs, sitting halfway up, watching her with those cataloging eyes. Pearl is... She looks around. Pearl is not in the visible part of the house. Gideon comes in from the kitchen. He has a sheet of paper that he places on the table in front of the chair nearest Faye, and he pulls the pad and pencil out of his pocket and places them beside it. The sheet of paper reads, "You may observe and ask questions. We will answer by writing. We will not answer questions about why we are silent. We will not answer questions about what happened in our family. We ask that you not print our names or the name of our property." Faye reads this. She reads it again. She nods. "I accept your conditions," she says. "And I want to add one of my own. I'm going to be honest with you. I've come here thinking I was writing a story for a newspaper. But what I've found in the past few days, talking to your minister, your doctor, your neighbors, is that I'm not sure a newspaper story is what this situation needs." She pauses. "I don't know yet what it needs, but I'd like to spend some time in your company before I decide. Is that acceptable?" Gideon and Hazel exchange a look. The look is brief and contains something that Faye cannot read. An entire language compressed into a glance, the language of two people who have been talking without words for 15 months and who have gotten very good at it. Gideon writes, That is acceptable. She spends the next 6 days with the Ames family, or adjacent to them, which is the closest any outsider can get. She joins them for meals. They accept her presence at their table without apparent resentment, setting an extra place without being asked on the second day, which she takes as a sign of genuine accommodation. She follows them into the orchard. She sits on the porch while they work. She watches. What she observes over those 6 days is a system of communication so developed and refined that it functions with the efficiency of speech, or near enough. The knocking code, which she slowly decodes, uses walls and table surfaces and the floorboards. 1 knock means yes. 2 means no. 3 means come here. A rapid series means urgency or emergency. There is a pad of paper kept in every room of the house. In the kitchen, the front room, the hallway, and she suspects upstairs as well. Written notes circulate among the family members with a fluency that suggests long practice. Gestures have been formalized. A hand opened flat means finished, done. Fingers to the wrist means time, hurry, or now. A chin lifted toward the door means go, leave, go outside. A hand pressed flat to the chest means I, me, my own responsibility. It is a language, a real one. Not complete. It cannot carry everything that language carries, but functional, efficient, and, she realizes with a start, in some ways precise, without the fuzz and blur of actual speech, without the ambiguity of tone and volume, and the 1,000 ways that human voice undermines the words it carries. This gestural and written language has a spare clarity that spoken language often lacks. When Gideon writes, "Get the fence post from the barn," his family knows exactly what he means. There is no possibility of misunderstanding through tone, no chance that frustration in his voice will make a simple instruction sound like a reprimand. The silence has removed something from communication, but it has also, in a strange way, clarified it. This clarification fascinates her and increasingly disturbs her, because the very precision of this silent language makes it inadequate for the things that need to be said with imprecision, with the uncertainty and stumbling that characterizes the language of the heart. You cannot write, "I'm sorry," in a note the way you can say it, with all the weight of a breaking voice.